What if everything you've been taught about winter survival in the wild is actually a dangerous misconception? Imagine a vast snow-covered prairie where temperatures drop to 40 degrees below zero and the icy wind literally knocks you off your feet. In the middle of this white hell, with zero visibility, Native Americans managed not only to survive, but to sleep comfortably through the night. They turned the deadly blizzard into a reliable warm blanket, using the laws of physics long before the advent of modern science textbooks. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how a handful of dry manure in an old bison hide became more effective than any expensive sleeping bag. To begin with, I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of survival in a blizzard, one that completely changes the rules of the game. When visibility dropped to arm's length, the Plains Indians did not try to fight the wind. They understood that snow is not only cold moisture, but also the best natural heat insulator. Instead of building tall, drafty shelters, they literally buried themselves in deep snowdrifts or created low cocoons. It is important to understand that the tactic of sleeping did not begin with closing one's eyes, but with choosing the right place. Nomads were skilled at reading snowdrifts to predict the future movement of air masses. They looked for places where the snowdrift would grow the highest, creating a natural protective wall against the wind. Inside such a shelter, the temperature could be 20 degrees higher than outside. A mistake in calculating the place to spend the night could cost a person their life in just a few hours. Therefore, preparations for nighttime sleep were carried out with mathematical precision and extreme attention to detail. Lakota hunters carefully checked the density of the snow before entrusting their safety to it. Every movement was aimed at creating the most airtight and stable space possible. Particular attention was paid to ensuring that the snow outside did not melt from the heat of the human body. If the snow turned to water, it instantly made clothing wet and completely useless. To prevent this process, a powerful multi-layered barrier was created between the person and the snow. Coniferous branches, dry grass, or pieces of old tanned leather were used. The pine branches worked like an excellent springy mattress, creating an important air layer under the back. It prevented precious heat from escaping into the frozen ground through contact with the soil. Heavy bison hides were placed on top of the person, with the fur turned exclusively inward. This system allowed the body to completely relax even during the strongest blizzard. In forest regions, the Iroquois used their longhouses as huge collective heaters. However, in camping conditions, their survival tactics were completely different and more mobile. They built temporary huts called wigwams, covering them with thick tree bark. The structure was additionally covered with snow to achieve complete airtightness. Inside such a small space, even the normal breathing of several people significantly raised the overall temperature. The main condition was to completely block the access of cold air at the very surface of the earth. Dense, frosty air always tends to sink, so the entrance was closed with a very heavy canopy. A high protective rampart of snow was necessarily thrown around the perimeter of the dwelling. An unusual solution was to use hot stones that were heated in advance on an open fire. These stones were carefully wrapped in pieces of leather and placed at the feet of the sleeper. The stone gave off its heat slowly, allowing the person to sleep soundly for several hours at a time. This tactic required the ability to light a fire before the blizzard became critical. Native Americans were true masters at predicting the weather based on the behavior of birds and clouds. They could see a snowstorm approaching long before it actually appeared on the horizon. This gave them the time they needed to prepare the perfect place for a safe night's sleep. Their ability to listen to nature replaced modern weather stations and barometers. Do you think modern people could survive even one night without thermal underwear? We are very interested in hearing your opinion on this, so please write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new secrets of ancient civilizations and survival experts. Want to know the main secret of the Apache and Lakota warriors that saved them in the most severe frosts? You would never guess why modern down jackets often lost out to the ordinary skin of an old bison. Bison skin, harvested in mid-autumn, had a completely unique structure of thick hair. It was able to retain a huge amount of still air inside its structure. Bison fur was so dense that even the icy wind could not penetrate it. Proper tanning made the skin very soft, allowing it to fit snugly around the sleeping person's body. This created the effect of an airtight cocoon that preserved the body's internal energy. The skin was the only reliable shield between life and icy death. Sleeping during a blizzard required the fur to be positioned in a specific way in relation to the person's skin. The long, thick hairs had to be in direct contact with the sleeper's body. This created an instant warming effect, as the hair immediately took on the body's temperature. If the fur had been on the outside, it would have quickly become clogged with snow and frozen. The Lakota Indians often used two heavy skins for one person. One skin was placed underneath as a mattress, and the second was used as a blanket on top. This created a completely enclosed fur bag, with only the tip of the nose sticking out. A stable microclimate was maintained inside this space throughout the long night. The hide not only kept them warm, but also allowed the body to breathe effectively through the pores of the skin. If a person sweated in an impermeable shell, they would inevitably freeze within an hour. The bison hide worked like modern membrane fabric, wicking excess moisture away. This kept the interior dry even during prolonged use. For maximum effectiveness, the skin was pre-treated with animal fat or bone marrow. This made the material water repellent and prevented it from stiffening in severe frost. A sleeping person always curled up to minimize heat loss. This natural posture helped to keep the energy of the internal organs safe. The tactic of group sleeping was also very widespread among hunting parties. Men lay close to each other under a huge canopy made of sewn skins. This allowed them to use collective heat and significantly save the resources of each warrior. It was always much warmer in the center of such a group than at the edges. The warriors often changed places during the night so that no one would get too cold. This method of sleeping required the highest level of trust and coordination within the group. Group sleeping was the basis for survival during long winter journeys across the open prairie. A bison skin became a common home for a whole group of people. Knowledge of the properties of materials allowed the Indians to feel confident in any storm. They were not afraid of blizzards, as they had thousands of years of successful experience behind them. A bison hide was not just clothing, but a sacred object that gave life. Every warrior cared for his hide more than any other possession. Interestingly, modern researchers have confirmed the exceptional thermal insulation properties of this ancient equipment. Are you ready to learn how Native Americans turned ordinary dust into high-tech insulation? In the next chapter, you will learn what unexpected materials helped them avoid turning into ice statues. How much do you think such a winter bison hide could weigh? You definitely didn't learn about this unique secret in your school history textbooks. In addition to heavy skins, Native Americans used a method of internal insulation that today would be called loose-fill insulation. They gathered huge armfuls of dry, tall grass just before settling down for the night. The grass was placed inside their clothing and bedding, creating countless air pockets. The secret was that the grass had to remain completely dry. It was often obtained from under deep snow, in places where it had not had time to rot. The Cree and Athabascan tribes had a whole art of laying grass layers correctly. First, coarse stems were used for strength, and then soft panicles for warmth. If a blizzard caught a person off guard, they could quickly build a kind of grass nest. Dry vegetation was simply stuffed between two layers of a leather shirt or moccasins. This simple method provided protection from the most piercing wind, which broke against the chaotic structure of the grass. The grass layer worked much more effectively than several layers of ordinary fabric. The uniqueness of this method lay in its absolute accessibility in all conditions. Unlike valuable fur, grass was practically under the feet of every traveler. Dry forest moss, which has unique antiseptic properties, was also actively used. Moss was placed in moccasins to keep the toes dry throughout the night. Dry moss perfectly absorbed excess moisture and prevented dangerous frostbite of the extremities. This small detail often became the deciding factor between life and the loss of toes. Another unusual technique was the use of dried dung from large wild animals. Although it sounds strange, dry bison patties were an excellent heat insulator. The dung blocks prevented the cold from the frozen ground from reaching the sleeping person's body. If necessary, they could also serve as excellent fuel for a small campfire. The Indians did not feel disgust for natural materials, understanding their high functional value. They perceived every detail of the landscape as a useful tool for protection. Grass mattresses protected the sleeper not only from the cold, but also from insidious dampness. An air cushion allowed condensation to drain down without lingering on warm skin. It was a well-thought-out engineering system, honed by thousands of years of practice in harsh conditions. By morning, the grass was often crushed and lost its properties, so it was discarded. Every evening at their new camp, the hunters gathered a fresh supply of insulating material. This tactic ensured that they always had clean and functional bedding for sleeping. Grass was a consumable resource that nature provided in unlimited quantities. The Indians knew how to take from the earth exactly what they needed to survive. The use of natural resources made them mobile and independent of bulky supplies. They could travel light, knowing that they would find insulation anywhere along the way. This knowledge was passed down from fathers to sons as an essential part of military training. The ability to find dry grass under the snow was more important than the ability to shoot a bow. Like this, if you never would have thought that ordinary hay could be such an important part of camping. We continue to reveal the secrets of ancient masters of survival in the most extreme conditions. Your support helps us find more and more amazing facts about the lives of the indigenous peoples of North America. What you are about to learn will forever change your perception of traditional Native American dwellings. The famous teepee is not just a leather tent, but a perfect aerodynamic device. In the Great Plains, blizzards could last for several days without interruption. The cone shape allowed powerful winds to flow around the structure without creating dangerous pressure zones. Inside the teepee, the Lakota Indians created a special quiet zone for safe sleep. Even during the strongest blizzards, the fire in the center remained steady and calm. A key element of survival at night was the inner lining, called a liner. This additional wall of skins was attached to poles at a certain height. The liner created the necessary air gap between the cold outer covering and the warm interior. Cold air entered from below and rushed upward between the walls, creating draft. Thanks to this system, people could sleep right at the edge without feeling a draft. The airflow carried away the smoke and at the same time acted as an effective heat shield. The upper valves of the teepee were adjusted using long external poles directly from the inside. An experienced woman could change their position in a matter of seconds in the dark. This was done to prevent the blizzard from blowing snow inside through the smoke hole. A properly adjusted teepee became a cozy and safe nest for the whole family. The snow that piled up around the teepee during a blizzard was deliberately not completely removed. The snowdrifts pressed the lower edges of the cover to the ground, preventing any air leaks. The snow wall acted as additional insulation for the foundation of this temporary home. Inside, an atmosphere of absolute silence was created, which was important for psychological calm. In such conditions, people could spend days on end conserving their physical strength. The Indians slept with their heads toward the center, where residual heat from the buried coals was retained. When firewood supplies were limited, sleep became a collective process of conserving energy. All family members were covered with several layers of heavy bison blankets. An important rule was to keep the air clean inside the tightly closed dwelling. The Indians always left a tiny gap for ventilation at the top of the structure. This prevented the dangerous accumulation of carbon monoxide from the coals smoldering all night. They understood the balance between warmth and breathing safety better than modern engineers. The teepee was mobile, yet incredibly resistant to the hurricane-force winds of the prairies. Its shape was nature's perfect response to the challenge of open and harsh spaces. Every detail of the structure, from the pegs to the smoke wings, had a deep meaning. Sleeping in a teepee during a blizzard was the safest way to wait out the storm. Many modern tents still use the principles laid down in the teepee design. However, no synthetic fabric can match the comfort of natural leather. The leather absorbed excess moisture and released it outside, keeping the inside dry. It was the living breath of the home, protecting its inhabitants from the winter cold. How difficult do you think it was to keep the fire going inside when the elements were raging outside? In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans coped with this task without matches. Basic question: could you light a fire if everything around you was covered in ice? In extreme cold, the human body goes into a special energy-saving mode. Native Americans understood these processes on a deep intuitive level long before the advent of medicine. They knew that before going to sleep, it was necessary to eat very high-calorie foods with fats. This provided the body with internal fuel to generate heat throughout the night. Pemmican was the ideal food for preparing for a long sleep in a frosty blizzard. This mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries was slow to digest and provided energy. Fat releases heat during metabolism for many hours at a time. This helped maintain a stable body temperature until dawn in the shelter. Breathing during sleep in the frosty air also required the use of a special technique. The Indians always covered their faces with the edge of a skin or a light scarf made of soft leather. This created a small warm air chamber in front of the mouth for preheating. Moisture from breathing was trapped in the fur, preventing the lungs from becoming hypothermic. This simple technique prevented coughing and drying of the mucous membranes during sleep. Sleep in a blizzard was rarely completely uninterrupted due to the instinct of constant self-preservation. People woke up periodically to check the condition of their shelter and the position of their blankets. It was a natural rhythm of life aimed at constantly monitoring the environment. The tribes had a special culture of sensitive sleep, which allowed them to react instantly to threats. Any change in temperature or sound of the wind brought a person to a state of complete readiness. Waking up for a minute, a warrior could move a little to get the blood flowing in his limbs. Then he would fall back asleep, restoring his body's strength. Indians avoided drinking large amounts of water immediately before going to bed. They knew that excess fluid in the body could lead to faster cooling. Snow was never eaten raw so as not to waste energy on melting it. This was a strict rule that was instilled in children from an early age. Thirst was considered a lesser enemy than the sudden loss of internal heat due to ice. Before going to bed, they often rubbed a thick layer of animal fat on their skin for protection. The fat clogged the pores and significantly reduced heat transfer through the surface of the sleeper's body. This method worked like a modern protective cream against frostbite and dryness. The fat film also protected against small ice crystals getting under clothing. This method was used by all members of the tribe, from warriors to small children and the elderly. Bison or bear fat was considered a valuable resource for maintaining health in winter. It helped the skin remain elastic and prevent cracking in the bitter cold. A body prepared in this way could withstand temperatures that would be fatal to an unprepared person. The Indians did not view the cold as an enemy, but as a condition to which one must adapt. Their bodies were trained to endure hardship from birth in harsh environments. Proper preparation made winter nights a time of rest rather than struggle. The physiology of sleep in a blizzard was a whole science, passed down through oral tradition. Every gesture and every action had a centuries-old practical basis for survival. Thanks to this, indigenous peoples thrived where others could not survive for a single day. Their experience remains a unique example of harmony between humans and extreme nature. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how you can sleep right in a snowfield? For people who lived in harmony with the wild, this was not unusual. There were situations when a blizzard caught a lone hunter far from any safe camp. At such moments, decisions had to be made instantly. Stopping in an open area often meant certain death from rapid hypothermia. The wind intensified the cold many times over, and visibility could drop to almost zero. It was impossible to build a fire, and moving on was deadly dangerous. Then they had to use knowledge that had been tested by generations. In such cases, the Indians used the tactic of short periods of sleep, leaning against their horses. They did not allow themselves to fall into a deep sleep. Their sleep was intermittent and controlled. The main task was not to lose heat and not to exhaust their strength. The horse served as a powerful living source of heat, its body temperature higher than that of humans. Its warmth was transferred through close contact. The animal also instinctively sensed the direction of the wind. It turned so as to shield its owner from the strongest gusts. If it was impossible to go any further, the Indians resorted to more radical methods. They built so-called snow graves. These were shallow pits dug in a matter of minutes. Time was of the essence. These pits were deliberately left open, allowing the blizzard to quickly fill them with snow. The snow acted as a natural insulator. It blocked the wind and kept the heat inside. What was deadly outside saved them inside. A person would lie on their back, pulling their knees up to their chest as much as possible. This position reduced heat loss. The body retained more heat in the area of vital organs. Every movement was carefully thought out. He covered himself with a bison cape or thick skin. Only a tiny hole was left for air. He constantly checked it with his hand. The blizzard quickly covered the shelter with an even layer of snow. The layer of snow acted as an ideal thermos. The temperature inside remained significantly higher than outside. Even in the strongest winds, it was relatively calm inside. In such a capsule, it was possible to wait out the most dangerous peak of the storm. The main condition for survival was not to fall asleep too deeply. A person had to wake up periodically. Checking the ventilation was mandatory. Falling asleep without control could end in tragedy. Dogs also played a huge role in the survival of northern tribes in camping conditions. They served as living sources of heat. In subarctic tribes, it was customary to sleep surrounded by dogs. People and animals literally shared the same warmth. The heat from the dogs' bodies allowed for significant savings in firewood. This was especially important in treeless areas. People felt protected on all sides. Such proximity reduced the risk of hypothermia. Dogs were the first to react to any danger. They sensed the approach of a predator or a sudden change in the weather. Their behavior was a kind of early warning system. People trusted them unconditionally. Folklore has preserved expressions about the degree of frost, measured in the number of dogs. 1 dog at night meant a slight chill. A night with 3 dogs meant extremely severe cold. On such nights, people huddled as close as possible to the animals. It was a mutually beneficial cooperation between humans and animals. Dogs received warmth and protection. People received a chance to survive. Such bonds were strengthened by centuries of living together. An unusual technique was to use an upside-down canoe as a temporary roof for sleeping. The boat was placed upside down. This created a dry and protected space underneath. Even in the snow, it remained suitable for rest. The air under the boat quickly warmed up from human breath. If the canoe was additionally covered with snow, it turned into a reliable shelter. The snow pressed the boat to the ground. This prevented it from blowing away. Eastern forest Indians often used this method while hunting. It did not require any extra effort. Everything necessary was already with them. It was an example of ideal mobility. The boat protected not only from snow, but also from falling icicles. This was especially important in the forest. The Indians knew how to turn any everyday object into a tool for survival. Their thinking was flexible and practical. Each such shelter was temporary. It was not intended for long-term living, but it provided the main thing, a chance to regain strength. Sometimes that was enough to survive until morning. Sleeping in an emergency shelter required strict psychological control. A person had to remain calm. Slow breathing helped to retain heat. Panic, on the other hand, led to a rapid loss of energy. In a snow grave, fear was the most dangerous enemy. It increased breathing and heart rate. This accelerated the cooling of the body. Therefore, ancient warriors learned meditative practices. They knew how to calm the mind even in life-threatening situations. Control over the body was part of survival. Calmness preserved warmth. The mind became as much a tool as a knife or a bow. These methods of surviving a blizzard were honed over centuries. Each survivor brought new experience to the tribe. Mistakes were remembered as well as successful decisions. Knowledge was constantly being added to. Thanks to this, indigenous peoples created a unique system of understanding northern nature. Snow ceased to be an enemy. It became a building material and a form of protection. Nature became an ally. In the next chapter, we will talk about how to keep the inner fire of the spirit alive. You will learn how Native Americans used hidden resources when everything around them seemed hopeless. Basic question: how long do you think you can lie under the snow without freezing? Even in the harshest blizzard, fire remained the main physical center of Native American life. However, sleeping at night during a storm required a special approach to the use of open flames. In a cramped shelter, it was important not to burn all the oxygen and to avoid a fire. Native Americans knew how to create special long-burning fires that smoldered slowly throughout the night. For this purpose, they used hardwoods or tightly compressed dry manure. These materials did not produce a high flame, but gave off steady and intense heat. The main secret was to bury the hot coals in ashes. A thick layer of ashes acted as an insulator, keeping the heat inside for many hours. The sleeping person felt a gentle warmth rising directly from the ground beneath their bed. This was much more efficient and safer than a regular open fire nearby. The method required great skill to keep the coals from going out until dawn. The ability to control smoldering was an essential skill for every head of a family or warrior. In the open prairie, Native Americans often used small portable stone braziers. Hot coals were placed in such a container, which accumulated thermal energy. The brazier was placed in the center of a circle of sleeping people to create a common comfort zone. The stone gradually gave off heat, working like a modern household oil radiator. This allowed them to survive in places where the vegetation was completely hidden by snow. The Indians believed that fire had its own spirit that demanded respect and care. Keeping watch over the fire was an honorable and very responsible duty in the winter camp. Even if the fire was hidden by ashes, someone always kept an eye on the ventilation of the shelter. It was necessary to ensure that dangerous carbon monoxide did not accumulate in the lower part of the teepee. By morning, the coals were carefully fanned with breath or special wooden pipes. This allowed for an instant bright flame for quick warming after a long sleep. Rapid restoration of body temperature in the morning was critical to health. The first few minutes after waking up were considered the most dangerous due to the low metabolism at that moment. Hot herbal tea helped to quickly get the blood flowing and prepare for a new day. The Indians knew that warmth must come from both outside and inside the body. Therefore, the morning ritual by the fire was observed by all members of the tribe without exception. Fire provided not only physical warmth, but also important psychological light. In the complete darkness of a blizzard, a tiny flame became a symbol of hope and the continuation of life. It united people, reminding them of their connection to their ancestors in the earth. The magic of hidden fire was the basis for survival in the harshest regions of the continent. The ability to handle fire in extreme conditions was a sign of a warrior's maturity. Young men spent a long time learning the art of preserving a spark during long journeys through snowdrifts. They carried smoldering coals in special leather pouches lined with wet clay on the inside. This allowed them to build a fire anywhere in a matter of minutes. Concealed fire technology allowed Native Americans to remain invisible to their enemies in winter. The absence of high flames and smoke made their camps virtually undetectable in the forest. This was a military advantage based on a deep understanding of the physics of combustion. Fire was their faithful ally in the struggle for territory and resources. Survival in a blizzard was not just a matter of physical fitness and the availability of skins. It was a serious test of the psyche of every person who found themselves trapped in the snow. Sleeping in conditions where the elements were raging above you required absolute inner calm. Native Americans learned from childhood to perceive the sound of the wind as a natural lullaby. Their philosophical attitude toward nature allowed them to maintain a low pulse even in danger. They conserved precious energy that would otherwise have been wasted on panic. Tribes had special songs and prayers to perform before hibernating for the winter. These rhythmic sounds helped synchronize the breathing of everyone in the same shelter. People sincerely believed that a blizzard was a living creature with which one could negotiate. This psychological attitude removed the feeling of isolation and fear of the unknown forces of nature. Sleep became a time of deep meditation and accumulation of inner mental strength. This made their spirit as strong as their trained bodies. An important aspect of survival was strict discipline during a winter storm. No one was allowed to leave the communal shelter alone without extreme necessity. Even experienced warriors could lose their bearings in the white fog in a matter of seconds. The Indians knew hundreds of cautionary tales about those who had disregarded this rule. Nighttime sleep was a time of collective responsibility for the safety of each member of the group. If someone began to shiver in their sleep, their neighbors immediately warmed them with their bodies. Fortitude was cultivated through real trials on expeditions led by older mentors. Young men learned to find joy even in the harshest and most uncomfortable conditions. The ability to maintain a clear and calm mind after waking up was part of military science. After a night of blizzard, the world looked completely different due to the changed terrain. It was necessary to instantly orientate oneself by barely noticeable signs on the surface of the snow. A mental map of the area allowed one to continue on the way without long deliberations and dangerous doubts. The Indians were proud of their ability to sleep where others saw only certain death. This confidence in their abilities was passed down from parents to children through legends. The psychology of endurance made them virtually invincible in their native habitat. They knew that their spirit was stronger than any wind or the most severe frost. Their inner silence helped them hear the approach of danger through the roar of the winter storm. Their heightened senses were not dulled even during deep-phase sleep in their shelter. It was an adaptation at the level of the nervous system, developed over dozens of generations. The psyche of the indigenous peoples was perfectly attuned to the frequencies of wild and harsh nature. They perceived winter not as an obstacle, but as a time for inner growth. Long nights in snow shelters were used to pass on knowledge and strengthen bonds. Sleep was only part of the overall process of interacting with the great spirit of winter. This spiritual component was no less important than warm bison skins. Psychological resilience allowed them to remain hopeful even in the most hopeless situations. They knew that after every blizzard, a clear and quiet morning would surely follow. This patience was their main virtue in the struggle against the whims of nature on the plains. Surviving a blizzard became for them the highest manifestation of human dignity and skill. The most vulnerable part of a sleeping person during winter sleep was always their feet. Heat was lost most quickly from the extremities, and frostbite of the toes could be fatal even after brief exposure to the cold. The Indians were well aware of this danger and paid primary attention to protecting their feet, relying on the centuries-old experience of their ancestors, accumulated in harsh climatic conditions. Winter moccasins differed significantly from light summer shoes in both design and size. They were deliberately made more spacious so that several layers of natural insulation could fit inside. The air trapped between the layers created a powerful thermal barrier. Such shoes did not restrict blood circulation, which was critical for retaining heat. The moccasins were stuffed with soft rabbit or muskrat fur or specially prepared dry grass. These materials were lightweight, retained heat well, and dried quickly. The result was a warm, breathable bag that reliably protected the toes from frostbite. The filling could be easily replaced in the field, making the system versatile and practical. Often, moccasins were not even taken off during sleep in a warm teepee or temporary shelter. This ensured immediate readiness to go out into the cold in case of sudden danger. Taking off one's shoes meant the risk of not being able to warm one's feet again. Therefore, sleeping in shoes was considered the norm, not the exception. The soles of winter shoes were usually made of rough bison hide with the fur on the outside. This solution provided warmth and improved traction on snow and ice. The fur prevented slipping and allowed for more confident movement even in the dark. Before going to sleep, the Indians always checked the condition of the soles and insoles. Special attention was paid to dryness. Before going to bed, wet insoles were always replaced with completely dry ones. Moisture was considered the main enemy of warmth. Even the warmest fur ceased to work if it was wet. Dry skin was the only guarantee of avoiding painful and dangerous frostbite. Warriors often carried spare dry insoles in their pockets, warming them with their own body heat. This allowed them to replace cold or damp elements of their footwear at any time. This approach demonstrated a deep understanding of physiology and the effects of cold on the body. Mittens played no less a role than footwear. They were never considered a secondary item. In the harsh northern climate, hands were just as vulnerable as feet. Mittens were tied with long leather laces to the sleeves of clothing, so as not to lose them in the dark or while sleeping. This solution prevented accidental removal of protection from the hands during deep sleep. Even if a person tossed and turned or woke up suddenly, the mittens remained in place. Losing them at night could mean losing your fingers by morning. The mittens were made of thick leather with very thick fur inside. They usually had the shape of a bag in which all the fingers were together. This arrangement allowed the fingers to warm each other. Individual finger gloves were considered less effective in severe frost. During sleep, the hands were kept pressed against the chest or stomach, where the body temperature was highest. This position helped maintain normal blood circulation in the hands. Even during sleep, body position was carefully controlled to minimize heat loss. Special hoods made from the skins of predatory animals were used to protect the head and neck. The fur of wolves, coyotes, and wolverines had the unique property of not becoming covered with frost from breathing. This prevented the formation of an icy crust around the face and made it easier to breathe at night. The hood was tightly fastened with straps, leaving only a small protected slit for the face. This directed the breath down and to the side, reducing the risk of icing. This design ensured comfort even during heavy snowstorms. The Indians knew that up to 40% of the body's heat could escape through an unprotected head. Therefore, sleeping without a warm headdress in winter conditions was considered deadly dangerous. Every detail of clothing was designed to conserve internal energy. Materials were selected based on their ability to withstand moisture, wind, and temperature changes. Clothing had to breathe but not let the cold in. This balance was achieved through years of observation and practice. Interestingly, winter clothing could quickly be transformed into a kind of individual sleeping bag. The long hems of leather shirts were turned up and fastened with belts. This created a closed thermal circuit around the entire body. This solution allowed people to sleep directly on the snow or in a shelter without additional bedding. The design of the clothing was the pinnacle of practicality and a deep understanding of the needs of the human body in extreme conditions. Moccasins and mittens were objects of personal pride for every skilled hunter and every housewife. They were decorated with porcupine quills, beads, or patterns that conveyed the family's history. But in winter, aesthetics always gave way to functionality. Good winter footwear was valued as highly as a reliable bow or a trusty horse. It could save a life just as surely as a weapon. Losing one's shoes was considered a real disaster. Protecting the extremities was key to maintaining the mobility and combat readiness of the entire tribe. Losing fingers meant losing hunting skills and becoming a burden on the community. Therefore, the rules for caring for feet and hands were observed with almost religious strictness. The Indians created a perfect system of winter equipment long before the advent of polar expeditions and modern technology. Their knowledge was the result of survival, not theory. This system proved its effectiveness in the harshest climatic conditions of North America. By studying the Indians' sleeping tactics in a blizzard, we discover amazing wisdom. Their survival was not accidental luck, but the result of precise scientific calculation. They did not try to conquer the elements, but masterfully adapted to their harsh laws. This experience teaches us humility in the face of the forces of nature, which we often underestimate. The simple solutions of ancient times often proved to be much more reliable than modern and complex technical systems. Buffalo hides and dry grass do not require batteries or complex maintenance on a hike. They always work as long as a person remains clear-headed and faithful to their traditions. These lessons in survival remain relevant even in our age of high technology. Ancient strategies remind us of the vital importance of preparing in advance for any difficulties. Native Americans never waited for a storm to begin before looking for a suitable place to camp. Their proactive behavior was the key to preserving their strength and calm at a critical moment. We can learn a lot from them in terms of planning for our own safety. Collectivism and mutual assistance were the foundation of the social structure of all North American tribes. Shared heating and distribution of responsibilities made the community a truly united and strong organism. A blizzard was a time of testing bonds when personal interests gave way to the survival of the people. This spirit of unity is more important than ever for any community today. Many modern camping technologies have their direct roots in the experience of indigenous peoples. We use layering and membranes that were invented thousands of years ago on the prairies. Knowing history helps us better understand the world around us and appreciate the legacy of our ancestors. Native American culture is a treasure trove of knowledge about the interaction between humans and the planet. A night in the white hell of the Great Plains was just another stage in life for the wise. They knew that their knowledge made them stronger than any ice storm or blizzard. These secrets were passed down by word of mouth, keeping the spark of life alive in the harshest of lands. We must cherish this knowledge as an important part of the universal history of survival. Each paragraph of this story highlights the incredible human will to live a full and free life. Native Americans proved that even in the most extreme conditions, it is possible to find a place to rest. Their experience is a tribute to human intelligence and the ability to adapt to any challenge. We hope these facts inspire you to learn more about nature. At the end of our story, we see a majestic picture of true courage and serenity. Winter blizzards no longer seem so frightening to us when we know these rules. Native Americans have left us a survival manual written in snow and skins. All we have to do is read it carefully and apply it to our lives. The world of indigenous peoples is full of mysteries that we have yet to fully unravel. Each of their customs had a solid foundation of practical use and spiritual meaning. We will continue our exploration of their amazing culture in the next episodes of our channel. Stay with us to learn more about the lives of the great tribes. May the experience of ancient warriors help you stay warm and calm in any life storm. Our history is a bridge between the past and the future, built on respect for the power of the earth. Thank you for walking this path with us through snow and time. See you again in the world of history and survival. We hope that this immersion into the winter life of the Native Americans has helped you better understand their unique world. Survival techniques, from tepees to bison skins, remain the pinnacle of human ingenuity and practicality. What other aspects of Native American life would you like to explore with us in the future? Suggest topics for new videos in the comments, and we will be sure to select the most interesting ones. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the continuation of our exploration of North American history.